as some of you may recall in one of my last unplayable card reviews where I talked about the card Allure of the Unknown, I mentioned my Rakdos Patron of Chaos Opponent's Choice Tribal deck. In that video, I asked if people wanted to see a deck of how my deck looks and how it works, and a few people said they wanted to, so I figured I would throw together a quick video going over what my deck does and what cards I chose to include. I don't have Allure of the Unknown in the deck currently, but I do plan on adding it soon. And I will say this video is a little different than normal. I'm going without a script, which for me is very unusual, and I'm worried it's going to be terrible, so we'll see how it goes. That said, I do want to just take you through what my deck's doing and talk about some of the more fun cards in the deck so that if you want to build a deck similar, you can, or even if you're just curious. I've broken the deck left to right into all different kinds of random categories. Over here, I've got my basic lands and all of my non-basic lands. In total, the deck has 36 lands, so it's a little low, but I do run quite a bit of ramp. The deck runs 15 pieces of ramp, and I think that kind of counteracts the limited number of lands I have in the deck. Notable lands, I guess I could highlight. I have a couple lands that sacrifice creatures. Hostile, Lazatep Quarry. I think those are the only two. As well as Reliquary Tower, because this deck tends to draw a lot of cards. But for the most part, there's nothing really special about the land package. That's probably something I could work on, but I kind of threw this deck together just with what I had on hand, plus a few cards that I really thought were interesting. So the land package probably needs more work than anything else. The ramp package is pretty similar in that it could use a little bit of work. I mean, obviously it's Rakdos, so most of the ramp is done via mana rocks. And there's a few that aren't particularly strong that I just have in here until I find a better one to replace it with, like Prismatic Lens and Warm Power Stone. They're fine, they get the job done, but not particularly impressive. Pendant of Prosperity is probably the only ramp piece in the deck that works with kind of the theme, wherein I'm giving my opponents a choice that they can make. This is a really cool card, though. I don't have it in this deck, but if you were to run something like Brand, and I'll show that on screen as I'm talking about it, you can use Brand to, obviously when this enters play, it goes under the control of an opponent, but Brand will give it back to you, because if you control and own this, when you tap it for 2 mana, you get to draw 2 cards and put 2 lands into play, which is obviously really, really strong. In this deck, though, I'm just playing it fairly, giving it to my opponents and hoping they make the right choice and let me draw some cards and ramp. I also think this is a super underrated card, Stone Speaker Crystal. I know Hedron Archive is largely not played in the Commander format anymore. I think it's a fine card, but I think Stone Speaker Crystal is overall much better. Having the ability to hate on graveyards with your mana rock is just really powerful. Thought Vessel and Decanter of Endless Water both are in the deck as well, because like I said, this deck typically draws a ton of cards. And that's largely because the commander, draws me 2 cards pretty much every turn. I found in 99% of cases, players do not want to sacrifice 2 non-land, non-token permanents to Rakdos' end step trigger. And so I'm drawing a lot of cards, and ironically, I really feel like he stays on the field longer than I would have expected. When I put the deck together, I thought, oh, he's going to be a removal magnet, and I have both arts. I don't really like this one, but I'm weird and like to have both all arts available for my commanders when I play. But like I was saying, I thought he was going to be a removal magnet. People were going to really hate him off the table, but in most games I play, he sits there for several turns before getting caught up in a board wipe or something, just drawing me cards, giving me value. Often I hold him back as a blocker, just because this deck is a little light on creatures. So oftentimes I'm not attacking with him, and that's okay because that's not really the deck's main strategy is to win by attacking with him. So, anyways, this next category here, this is my draw package. I already mentioned my commander draws me cards, but even outside of that, the deck has about 20 cards that can give me card advantage in some sort of way, and the vast majority of them are on theme. Seize the Spotlight. This is a fantastic card that lets your opponents choose to either give you a creature or let you draw a card and make a treasure. If I have a sack outlet in play, which is why I have some of those sack outlet lands I mentioned, people are going to give you the card and the treasure because they don't want to lose whatever creature you take from them. So that's why I included those just as that, so just for the implication, if you will. Pain's Reward, hilarious card. Technically, if I don't have the most life, I can't guarantee that this is going to draw me cards. But the deck wins via burn a lot of times anyways, so having my opponents bid a lot of life to draw some cards is definitely on theme and fits the game plan. I have Risk Factor and Browbeat. These are largely seen as unplayable. I have played them many times, and many times they have been great for me. They are conditional draw spells that your opponents can choose to take damage instead of letting you draw. Now, my deck has no problems drawing just from the commander alone, so I've found oftentimes I don't need the draw. And so whether or not I just burn my opponents or get the draw, it doesn't matter to me so much. I'm just casting them to give that choice. Humble Defector, that's a commander classic in my opinion. If you can play politics with this card at all, you're going to get 4 draws out of this at least before it's probably killed to a board wipe or something. Golem Scheming's Guide. This is an interesting one. I've thought about taking it into the deck a few times. I do like that it fits the opponent's choice theme, but I am horrible at trying to trick my opponents, and I almost never get the card draw out of it, honestly. It probably needs to go. Combustible Gear Hulk is a classic. Uh, my deck has actually a decently high mana value average, and so if my opponents choose to mill, there's a good chance they're going to take a lot of damage. In fact, hold on. 3.44 is the deck's average mana value. So yeah, that's pretty high. Meaning if they do choose to mill to the Combustible Gearhawk, they'll probably take a lot of damage. Plarg and Nasari. Again, this one is really kind of a weird fit. It's only in here because it gives me pseudo card advantage. I have to cast it in the moment, and I have no idea what I'm going to get. But again, the opponent's choice fits the theme. Shakedown Heavy, that's a personal favorite of mine. I have found probably 75% of the time people give you the draw just because I'm typically attacking someone who doesn't have a good block and they don't want to take the damage, especially as life totals get lower. So it's almost always a great blocker that's just drawing me a card every turn, which I think is pretty good. Ensnared by the Mara. This is an amazing card. If you haven't played this card before, it's similar to Combustible Gear Hulk, but for each of your opponents. And it's based off the mana values of their deck, so a little harder to predict, but either way, I found this to be really effective in every game I've played it. Clackbridge Troll is another one similar to the, what's this game? Shakedown Heavy I mentioned before, where that oftentimes it's an 8/8 trampler, and then as the game goes later, it becomes a great blocker that draws you cards, gains you a bit of life. Definitely fits the theme as well. And I have 2 more here. Sivrus Nightmare Speaker, which this one's a little tough because my deck doesn't have a lot of things worth sacrificing. Although again, I mentioned the Seize the Spotlight. It's another sack outlet, so that if it kind of worked with that card. But ultimately, this is one that might get cut in the long run just because I don't have enough sacrifice fodder to really take advantage of it. Although it is nice to have a sack outlet at ready for when someone, goes and swords to plowshares your commander or casts a farewell or something so you can get some value on its way out. Indulgent Tormentor is another fun one where, early on in the game, players will just pay the 3 life, then later they might sacrifice the creature, but by the end, you're pretty much drawing a card every upkeep, which is pretty cool. And that covers the main draw cards in the deck. Down here, you'll see later as I talk about some things, I have quite a few powerful, well, this Deflecting Swat's just a good stuff card. That doesn't need to be in the deck. I just love the card. These 4 cards, though, are all Spell Copiers, Tempt with Mayhem, Increasing Vengeance, Display of Power, Flare of Duplication. All of these are in here because I have a lot of really interesting and powerful instants and sorceries, and there's not a lot of, they're usually one of one cards, so I wanted more ways to replicate them. And so that's why those are in here. Like even on some of the draw cards, what was the one? Ensnared by the Mara. That's a fantastic copy target. If I can cast 2 of those in a single turn, I'm either gaining incredible card advantage or burning the table for a ton of damage. So it's a great way to start closing out the game. In terms of reanimation, the deck doesn't really run much, but I do have this Visions of Dread and Dredge the Mire, both of which reanimate from my opponent's graveyards, but they're the ones that choose which creature I get. They're not particularly good. They're okay. My deck had ways to manipulate my opponent's graveyards so that I could get the creatures I wanted, these would be a lot better. But as they are, they're still good. Every now and again, I'm able to hit a bomb, but for the most part, they're in there more for theme than they are for effectiveness. If I wanted to use these cards more effectively, I would definitely run some targeted graveyard removal, which my deck really doesn't have. This here is my removal package. I have some really powerful removal spells that are generically good, and some that are less good but definitely fit the theme more. Killing Wave's one of my favorites. This is probably, or not probably, this is definitely my only pseudo board wipe in the deck. It requires players to pay an amount of life to keep each of their creatures. So obviously players will willfully sacrifice any of their smaller stuff and pay their life to keep their more important creatures. So it's not a very good board wipe, but again, the deck usually wins by burning the table out, and so this is a great way to facilitate that. Diochan Artful Beauty is an interesting one. You get to destroy a creature, and then your opponent gets to destroy a creature. So I'm giving my opponents a choice, but I found this to be really, really effective. Unless I am by far in the lead, my opponents are typically willing to work with me so that I can kill one thing that's hurting them, then they'll kill, another thing that's not mine, and then I'm able to get a couple uses out of it before someone finally says, we need to get rid of that, and they use its own destroy ability to kill Diochan, which definitely happens, but it's a very cool card from the Portal 3 Kingdom set. I'm not sure where this was reprinted, but I picked that up because I liked the art. Custody Battle is another really fun one where players have to sacrifice lands to keep whatever creature I put this on. Otherwise, they're giving it to an opponent. And they never give it to me. As soon as I cast this on a creature, they're way too petty to pass it my way. But that doesn't matter because the main purpose of it is it stops a creature from attacking. Unless you're willing to sacrifice the land, which some decks would be willing to, but not most. And you're giving it away on that upkeep, so unless you have a haste enabler, that creature is just never attacking. Maybe it can be a good blocker, but it's a great way to shut down someone who maybe in Voltron or something like that. I don't want to talk about all of my removal spells because some of them are pretty boring. Zoyawa's Justice, Rakdos, Charm, Abrade, Chaos Warp, nothing too special about those. But I do want to mention Fatal Lore, and This Is How It Ends. I think these are both fun. This is how it ends. The target creature's owner shuffles it into the library. So that already is pretty powerful for a removal spell, in my opinion, in black, since it gets around indestructible and all kinds of other removal problems. But on top of that, after you do that, they have to face a villainous choice. Either I get to remove a second creature they control, or they lose 5 life. So I've actually found this to be pretty good. Players typically will choose the 5 life until they get low, and then you get 2 creatures for 4 mana, which is a very good rate. And again, it's shuffling, so it's even better than Destroy effects. Fatal Lore, this is a cool card. I don't know if I would say it's amazing, but in its pseudo draw, pseudo removal. So I get to remove 2 of your creatures and they draw 3, or I get to draw 3. Is that good? I don't know. I haven't had it show up enough in my games to know if I really like this card or not, but it definitely fits the theme. And I mean, 2 creatures for 4 mana, like I said, that's a pretty good rate if you can get away with it. So down here, these are 3 interesting cards. 2 of these cards are Tribute. I wanted to do more Tribute in the deck because I think Tribute is just a weird mechanic from the original Theros block. But Tribute, most of the cards aren't very good. So I only have 2 Tribute cards in the deck, Oracle of Bones and Thunderbrute. And how Tribute works is, as the creature enters the battlefield, any of your opponents can choose to choose to give your creature +1/+1 counters. If no one does, then you get the Tribute effect. Oracle of Bones, if its tribute isn't paid, as in it does not get the +1/+1 counters, you get to cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand for free. And as you'll see in a second, I do have some powerful instants and sorceries. Well, I've already shown a couple of them that I would love to cast for free, so that's pretty good. And it's a 4 mana, 3/1 haste. However, most of the time I found people do pay the tribute, so it ends up being often just a 4 mana, 5/3 haste, which isn't particularly impressive, but it's not bad. Thunderbrute is a 6 mana 5/5 with trample, but it has tribute 3. So people can either make it an 8/8 trampler, which I would say is pretty impressive, or if tribute isn't paid, it becomes a 5/5 trampler with haste. So this one, I find people usually don't pay the tribute. They let it just be a 5/5 trample haste, but it fits the theme, so I include it in the deck. Half the time I end up leaving it up as a blocker, but Wildfire Eternal is another one kind of similar to that Oracle of Bones. It's a 1/4 with Afflict, which means when you block it, you take 4 damage. However, if it isn't blocked, again, I get to cast an instant and sorcery from my hand for free, just giving my opponents a choice. Do you want to take that 4 damage to block it, or do you want to just let me cast something for free? I actually think this is an underrated card, because a lot of times you can use this politically. Be like, hey, let me hit you for 1, and I will cast this instant and sorcery that's going to really hurt whoever's in the lead, whoever's the arch enemy in the table. I mean, they might be like, no, screw you. You got the mana. I just want you to cast it, but definitely has political potential. Moving on to these ones. These are my primary, I don't know, they're almost like soft stacks choice cards. Cards that all require an opponent to either pay life or discard a card or sacrifice a permanent, stuff like that. Polygraph Orb, it also draws me a couple cards, which is never bad, but then it lets me collect evidence. Sorry, I'm probably not showing this on camera. Like I said, this is not how I typically do things, and it's hard for me to focus on like pointing my mouth at the mic, showing cards on camera. I'm probably doing a horrible job. I might not even upload this. It might be terrible. I don't know. We'll find out when I get into the editing room. Anyways, though, Polygraph Orb, You can collect evidence 3, which exile mana value of 3 out of your graveyard. Each opponent loses 3 unless they discard a card or sack a creature. So a lot of these are effects like that. And Sivris, which I showed in my card advantage section, does a similar effect to that. Court of Ambition, the same thing, except if you're the Monarch, it does it twice. Archfiend of Depravity, this is an amazing card that forces your opponents to keep only 2 creatures, which is amazing. Mogis God of Slaughter, and this is a secret lair version that's got this really dumb font, but I just love the art, so I included it. Similar, this is dealing damage unless they sacrifice a creature. Just goes right in the deck, and sometimes it can be a 7/5 beater, which is nice. Obnixilis, this is another pseudo sack outlet in the deck if I need to, and it can be card draw if I need to, it can be burn if I need to, but primarily I'm, getting rid of maybe my, they give me an 8/8 Thundering Brute, I sacrifice it to the Obnixilis, I draw some cards, and I start draining the table. That's pretty much what that's here for. Perforating Artist, Rottenmouth Viper, again, they're all doing the same thing. You either have to sack a permanent, discard a card, or you take life. So these are all burn cards, really. Grave Consequence is an interesting one. Each player may remove any number of cards in their graveyard from the game, and then each player loses 1 life for each card in his or her graveyard, and I draw a card. So it cantrips, which is nice, and it's technically graveyard hate, which is nice, but obviously players are going to keep their most powerful graveyard spells or creatures or whatever. They're going to keep them there. They're going to pay that life. So really, it's a minor burn spell that gets rid of some cards in a graveyard. If I didn't want to stick so closely to my theme of letting my opponents choose, I would replace this with a stronger graveyard hate piece. But this is what I have for now. In fact, speaking of graveyard hate, this deck should have Scavenger Grounds. It doesn't because I forgot until this moment. It also doesn't have Bojuka Bog, so it's definitely, like I said, the land base needs some work. This last category over here is actually my favorite group of cards. These are the true choices that I really want people to be making. Mage's Contest is a red counter spell where players bid life. The highest bidder loses life to their bid, but if I'm the winner, I get to counter the spell. So that's hilarious. If I have the most life in the game, this is a guaranteed counter spell in Rakdos, which is great. I don't have a lot of life link in the deck, so that's not necessarily going to happen, but even just making my opponent bid 10 life to get their spell to resolve, super worth it. So I love that card, and I have had a ton of success using it. Would recommend if you want to make any kind of control deck in red. Captive Audience is a brutally mean card, but I absolutely love playing it. You put it on one opponent, whoever's in the lead, and then on their upkeep, because it enters under their control, so it's their upkeep, not yours, keep in mind. On that player's upkeep, they have to choose one of the 4 that haven't been chosen, and all options are terrible. The first, your life total becomes 4, then you have to discard your hand, and then finally, each opponent creates 5 2/2 black zombie creatures. I've found most players will choose to give zombies to their opponents first, then discard their hand second, and then finally end with your life total becomes 4. So keep in mind that, you might want to try to play around that order because that's what I've found. But I mean, even just giving, whoever the arch enemy is, giving this to them, and so everyone gets to make 5 zombies to try to take them out, I think it's worth it. And it's very fun. It's on theme. It is a little brutal though, so if you don't like being mean to people, I wouldn't recommend it. Prisoner's Dilemma is also a standout card in the deck. It's a little confusing. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but essentially it's a burn spell. I've had plenty of games where each player ends up taking 12 damage, and that's just great. Next up, we've got Illicit Auction. This is similar to the card I shared earlier, Custody Battle, where I'm trying to take control of a creature. But with this one, it's another life bidding card. And whoever is the highest bidder loses that amount of life and gets to gain control of whatever the creature is. Now, 5 mana is not a ton, but I typically would rather hold up some mana. So I think this is one of the prime targets when I get a free spell, where I get to cast this for free and hopefully burn somebody down as they gain control of a creature. So I typically like to target commanders with this because people will fight a lot more to keep control of their commander than they will other creatures, typically. So that's where I found the most success with that. These last 2 are definitely my most favorites. The first is Choice of Damnations. This card is so goofy, but it has won me games. Target opponent chooses a number. Then I get to choose if that player loses that much life or sacrifices all but that many permanents. So how this works, if someone chooses a really low number, say they choose 5, I can have them either lose 5 life or sacrifice everything but 5 permanents. So they can't choose a low number. But if they choose a really high number because they want to keep all their permanents, well, then I can just burn them for that much life. You can use this early in the game, although this is typically a finisher for me, where someone has a big board, but they're down to 10 life. Okay, now what do they choose? Like I said, this is another one that can be a little mean. If no one's eliminated from the game yet and you're targeting someone with this, it can feel a little mean. But when there's someone's already eliminated or it's just a 1v1 situation, this is a great way to close out a game, and I'm a big fan. This last one, this one might come as a surprise, but I've had so much fun with this. It's draw a card, then each other player may draw a card. Whenever a card is drawn this way, Explosion of Riches deals 5 damage to target opponent chosen at random. You are going to do at least 5 damage because you're drawing a card. So there's already going to be 1. And every single time I've played this card, all of my opponents have drawn. Every single time. They want the free draw. They're not going to take the damage. They're going to get lucky, whatever they think. It doesn't matter. Everyone always takes the draw. So in every game I have played, it has been draw a card, everyone draws a card, and you deal 20 damage across the table. I'm a huge fan of Explosion of Riches, although 6 mana to do it is really steep. So again, ideally, I may be casting it for free with Oracle of Bones, or I've got Temp with Mayhem or Flare of Duplication in hand so that I can get multiple uses out of it, because since it is pretty expensive for the effect. I've mentioned it a few times throughout as I've gone over explaining the cards, but the deck typically wins by burning the table out and then maybe finishing the last points of damage with a little bit of attacking if needed, if it's relevant. But it's not a heavy control deck. Oh, I didn't even mention these ones. These are 2 creatures down here I forgot about. Sorry. They're creatures that do damage when they enter, basically. Vexing Devil, if an opponent takes 4 damage, it just dies. And every time I've played it, someone takes the 4 damage and it dies. And that's fine. So it's basically a burn spell. Demanding Dragon is similar, but at least the body gets to stick around. Anyways, sorry about that. Like I was saying, the deck typically wins by burn. And as a result, I'm not attacking much. It's not a draw-go control deck or anything like that. But typically my turn is draw, deploy, or develop one thing, hold up a bit of mana for removal or protection, pass. And I count some of these down here also as removal and protection. Temp with Mayhem and Display of Power and Flare of Duplication. They let you copy instant sorceries you don't control. So they can be used to copy a counterspell to let something resolve, or they can be used to, I used them once to copy a Cyclonic Rift that was overloaded so that everyone was similarly affected, which was, so there wasn't this one-sided crazy board wipe that won someone the game. And you typically want to play a slower game, a more political game to try and get other players to do the work for you so that you're not, burning down all 3 of your opponents at once. And it's a lot of fun. I think the people I play with would agree that it's a more interesting deck. It's certainly not super powerful. I don't think anyone would have any problem playing against it. His deflecting SWAT. So technically, I think that makes it bracket 3, but you could remove that easily, and I think this would be solidly in bracket 2. If you care about brackets, most of my pods don't really care too much, so I don't have to worry about it very much. But yeah, this is my Opponent's Choice Tribal deck. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope I did a good job showcasing the cards on camera and talking into the mic so you can actually hear me. Like I said, this is the first time I've ever done something like this without a script, so it might be terrible. Anyways, thanks, and I will see you next time.